8, 7, 6,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff at dawn. The dawn of Orion and a new era of American space exploration.
It's Bradders from Rabid Games here, and welcome back to some more Kerbal Space Program, and for that, another Kerbal Space Program mod video. This mod is I've kind of already covered this mod in a little bit of detail because this is the SpaceY mod. You may have seen me using this on my mission to Eve, which is currently ongoing, but I thought I'd make this video today because, well, I already did a KSP News episode in midweek, and there hasn't been any real developments since then as far as I'm aware, so in order to bring you guys a video today, I decided that I was going to do another mod video because these things are nice and enjoyable. So yes, what this mod does is add massive parts into the game. We are talking 5 meter and up. 3.75 meter and 5 meter parts for really huge rockets. Trust me, these things are rather large indeed. So let's start off with the probe cores. We have 2 new probe cores. We have the 3.7 meter Kerbal SpaceY stack guidance system, a smaller and therefore inferior version of the SpaceY SGS developed in partnership with Kerbal. Now with interior in Kerbal's trademark orange, fits standard Kerbal 3.75 meter stacks. This thing holds a unit of 6,000 electric charge and has a mass of 0.9 tons. So if we get it in here, we can see the new we can see the texture on it. Quite like this texture actually. All of the parts in this are much like the KAX mod. They are really well textured, and I just love the way that they've been done. They're also stock-alike as well, which means that hopefully they should run like a dream and there shouldn't be too much impact in performance as they all use the same textures as the stock parts. So that's the 3.75 meter, which is already pretty huge probe core. We then have the larger version, the SpaceY Stack Guidance System 5 meter. One of the most advanced guidance computers on the market, this large diameter probe core will allow landing large booster sections as well as navigating large vehicles in general. It has a cost of 12,500 funds, which is rather a lot, and it also has a mass of 1.2 tons and an electricity charge capacity of 12,000 units. So if we take it out here, it looks roughly the same as the 3.75 meter core, only of course larger and with a blue interior, which is very nice. And if we stick one underneath the other, you can see there is a definite difference in radius. Let's drag these down here for a second. If I just press shift and move these things down, you can see how large these are compared to the Kerbals on the floor, which are building these things. They're pretty huge. If I just move these down onto the floor here, you can see that it's pretty huge compared to a Kerbal, which shows just how large of a rocket you can build with these things. They are quite special, some of the rockets. But it's not just probe cores that they have added into the game with SpaceY. It adds in new fuel tanks and stuff as well. So let's try and find these here wherever they have gone. Here they are. So first off, we have the SpaceY, I don't know how to pronounce this, FD2C 3.75 meter fuel tank nose cone. There we go, did it eventually. 3.75 meter fueled nose cone. Aren't aerodynamic nose cones supposed to be wasted space? Who thought to put fuel in this? It's crazy talk. And it holds 810 units of liquid fuel and 990 of oxidizer, has a mass of 10.1 tons, and a cost of 3,600. Now, there is a variety of different nose cones here. We have larger ones for 3.75. Obviously, we have a larger expanded version of this. We have a larger expanded 5 meter nose cone. All of which of these, as I said, contain fuel, which is nice because it means that your boosters on your ships will be more aerodynamic, and they will also carry a bit more fuel as well. I just generally like this concept in general, and I wish it was added into the stock game because the nose cones, aside from providing a bit more aerodynamic stability and just generally looking nice, don't really have much of a purpose. They're just essentially dead weight. And so having a little bit of fuel in them would just give them a little bit of extra purpose, which is always good. I like parts that are very versatile. So if we put these back into, obviously, I don't know, I haven't got a probe core. Let's get a little probe core out so that I can mess around with these parts. Let's get rid of those. That's right. And then we're going to move on to the main tank sections. We have the SpaceY FD6 fuel tank. This is the smallest 5-meter variant of all of these fuel tanks. It has a liquid fuel capacity of 2,835 and an oxidizer capacity of 3,465. So if you bring this out here, you can see, compared to the 0.625 meter probe core, it is rather large. In fact, it's struggling to even attach. You can see the definite size difference there compared with one to the other. And it says in the description, a fuel tank that is very wide but tiny by SpaceY standards, which it is indeed, because some of the fuel tanks I'm about to show you are just plain huge. We have the next size up, the SpaceY F12 fuel tank. A fuel tank that is very large but small by SpaceY standards, holds a liquid fuel unit of 5,670 units and an oxidizer unit of 6,930. So we take this off and stick it on underneath. You can see it's basically twice the size. It's just this tank, only around about twice the size, which is nice. And I think, again, the texturing is very nice. I like these sort of integrated tanks underneath. I think that looks very nice indeed. We also have the next size up now. This is starting to get very large, I can tell you. We have the SpaceY F26 fuel tank. A fuel tank that is very large but small by SpaceY standards. Has a mass of 141 tons. A liquid fuel unit of 11,340 and an oxidizer unit of 13,860. Now this one bears your flag. As you can see, we have the flag of happiness on the side here. Obviously you can toggle that if you want to. You can get rid of it and turn it on. And it is basically twice the size of this tank. You can see it's going up logarithmically. So this is twice the size as this is twice the size of this, and this final tank, a very hefty fuel tank for your larger heavy lift vehicles, the SpaceY F38 fuel tank, is twice the size of this. Yes, we are going even larger. You can see if I stick this on here, again, it also has the flag on it, which you can toggle as well. Has a unit of fuel of 17,010 units, an oxidizer unit of 20,790. These fuel tanks are huge. They are 5 meter. As I said, they dwarf the 0.625 meter variants of the parts. Let's get an orange tank out here for comparison. This used to be the largest part in the game before obviously the Kerbal stuff came in with the NASA expansion and everything in 0.23. But let's just get one of these things out in comparison. You can see these things are tiny in comparison with these massive fuel tanks. And like I say, the size goes up logarithmically, so this is bigger than this is twice as big as this is twice as big as this. And it makes a lot of sense actually. And finally, for the fuel tanks, we have the SpaceY F9A53 fuel tank adapter. These names are very catchy, as you can tell. Has a mass of 53.5, a liquid fuel storage capacity of 4,252.5 units, an oxidizer unit capacity of 5,197. The description says, the engineers at SpaceY Technologies have always wondered why these large conical adapter parts are usually empty. Our solution is to fill it with fuel. And so this is a 5 meter to 3.75 meter adapter, I believe. Let's have a look. Yes, I believe it is. Let's get a 3.75 meter part just to check. Where are they? Where are you? There we go. So this is the 3.75. This is currently, if in the stock game, the largest fuel tank you can get. You can see here it is dwarfed once again in comparison with the SpaceY fuel tanks. They are absolutely huge. I thought these parts were large enough before I saw these guys. I mean, look at it. It's just bloody huge. But that's it with regards to the fuel tanks. Not that you'd actually want any more with regards to fuel tanks. There are a rather large amount of fuel tanks already in the game, which will fit perfectly fine with these, providing you use these adapters. So let's just get rid of all this here. And this isn't the only thing that SpaceY adds on into the game, though. We have a couple more engines, and if I can press the right button, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you them now. So for exceptionally large fuel tanks, we also have exceptionally large engines, both in 3.75 and 5 meter diameters. So let's start off with the SpaceY K1 Kiwi engine. Has a mass of 2.0, a max thrust at sea level of 367.373, a max thrust in a vacuum of 425, but it doesn't generate electric charge, which could be a concern if your vessel doesn't particularly have any form of electrical power generation, such as solar panels or RTGs. It says in the description, meant to be a giant leap forward in small size boosters, the K1 Kiwi is similar to the LVT-45, but with twice the punch due to its advanced turbo pump design. It comes at a cost, however, since it is more expensive and less efficient. So if we take this out here, you can see, I think this is actually a 1.25 meter engine or a 2 meter engine. Let's just grab a fuel tank for comparison here. Let's get a 1.25 meter out and stick this on underneath. Yeah, this is a 1.25 meter engine, so this is the smallest out of all of them. And like it says, it's got a lot more power than the LVT-45, and it's supposed to be a replacement for it. However, it's less efficient. So you can make your own decisions based on the different playstyles that you like. Personally, I think I'd prefer this engine over the LVT-45 because I'm more of a bit of a gung-ho sort of Kerbal Space Program player. I like to get things done as quickly as possible and not necessarily the most efficient way. And so this engine will suit my playstyle as it has a lot more thrust, and so it gets things done a lot faster. So let's just get rid of these and we'll go for the next engine, which is the M1 Moa heavy lift engine. Has a max thrust of 836.333 at sea level and a max thrust of 965.0 in a vacuum. Again, this doesn't generate any electric charge. A single Moa M1 engine, similar to the models of the larger M5 and M9 clusters, which we will get onto in a second, splitting the difference between efficiency and overall thrust. Comes supplied with both 2.5 meter, 3.75 meter, and 3.75 meter to 5 meter. God, that was a mouthful. Conical adapter fairings selected by using one of the 2 lower attachment nodes, which we will get onto that in but a moment. So if we stick this on here, you can see that this is, I believe, a 3.75 meter part. I shall check for that right now. I shall grab a 3.75 meter fuel tank and see if I can stick this thing onto the tiny probe that I've got. Let's stick it there. And we'll see if we can pop this on underneath. Okay, so this is actually a 2.5 meter part. 2.5 meter engine. Seems like SpaceY mod has one or two engines per actual class size. So you can see here it is a very nice little engine. Again, I love the modelling on it, and it's basically a similar version of the Kiwi engine. This is basically designed to replace the LVT-45 swivel here. I'm guessing this is probably designed to replace the skipper, seeing as it has a similar thrust value and it seems to be a similar sort of size. That's basically all I've got to say about this. Once again, the modelling is a very, very well done job there, and yeah, it suits my playstyle more than perhaps a lot of these engines, because though it is less efficient, it just has a lot more thrust, which means things can be done a lot quicker. Put that away now. Moving on to the SpaceY M5 Moa heavy lift engine cluster. You can see these names are getting more and more catchy, shall we say. This has a mass of 14, has a max thrust at sea level of 2,647.73. The reason that I'm stuttering there is because it has four max thrust values, because this is a very special kind of engine. Basically, if you've ever seen SpaceX and their attempts to land a first stage of a rocket on a floating barge, you will know that they use, on their Falcon 9 rocket, they use a cluster of engines. Not too similar to this, they use usually a few more clusters similar to the M9, which we'll get onto in a second. But during descent, these 4 radial engines, they've already burned out, they've used up all their fuel, and so in order to descend safely, they just use this one single engine. And that's basically what they do with this. It has a landing engine. It says in the description, similar to its its bigger brother, the M9 engine cluster. The M5 cluster features only 5 of the famed MOA M1 engines. However, they have been tuned slightly in favour of efficiency and a lighter mass, suitable as an upper stage engine. Now basically what this means is that at full thrust, this engine is going to be producing about 3,522 at sea level units of thrust at sea level and 4,200 in a vacuum. However, when only the one engine is running, it's going to be producing 2,647 in an atmosphere and 3,360 in a vacuum. And like I say, this is used for landing, re-landing stages, if that's a correct way of saying things. It's used for landing dead stages on either back at the Kerbal Space Center or on a barge out at sea. It's basically designed for you to do SpaceX landings. We also have the MOA M9, which is basically the more powerful version. And you can see here we have more radial engines rather than just the 4. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7 radial engines with 1 in the center. Again, this is used for landing on a floating barge or back at the Kerbal Space Center or wherever you desire, using this one engine in the middle here, just to slow your descent and what have you. It says in the description, a very powerful heavy lifter engine featuring 9 SpaceY M1 MOA engines. Note, only suitable for the lower stages. Use the mode switch to engage only the center engine for landing. And so obviously if you right click on it, you can toggle the mode. And so you can see here it changing from mode to all engines, mode to center only. I believe you can do the same with this one. Let's try that out for a second here. So yeah, we've got the toggle mode, all engines and center off. And so yeah, if you want to do a SpaceX landing, then you can by all means do it with these parts. So if we get rid of them, we'll go on to the next singular engine here, which is the most powerful singular engine as far as I'm aware in this pack. The SpaceY R1 Ratite Super Heavy Lift Engine has a max thrust of 2,010 at sea level and 2,200 in a vacuum. Again, none of these seem to produce electric charge, which could be a little bit of a concern if you are launching a larger spacecraft, shall we say, which perhaps doesn't have any power generation. It says in the description, designed for pure lifting power, the Ratite series engines have low efficiency but high thrust, designed to work in clusters for large payloads. So if we get out here and we stick it on, I believe this is a 3.75 meter engine, and it's the only 3.75 meter engine currently available with SpaceY. And as you can see, modelling is very good again. There's not really much to say about this because these engines come in singular, as you can see here, singular variants and cluster variants, as we've already seen. We're about to see a cluster of these things, so unless you're making an upper stage, for pure lifting power, I would avoid this engine for actual first stages of rockets, and instead go for its bigger brother, the SpaceY R5 Ratite Super Heavy Lift Engine Cluster. Again, this has the feature of the MOA engines, where you can only activate the center engine if you want, if you need to land something. It says designed purely for lifting power, this cluster of 5 R1 Ratites will attain some of the best thrust to payload weight ratios available with current technology. However, it will cost you in fuel efficiency, and the engine itself is quite massive, only suitable as a lower stage engine. Now I believe this is a 5 meter, yes, this is definitely a 5 meter part, so we'll try and stick it on here. So you can see it's having a few attachment issues here, but we've got it on eventually. You can see here it has a max thrust of 9,137.937 at sea level and a thrust of 10,000 in a vacuum. That's with all 5 engines running. It's about just under half of that, just over half should I say, when you have just the one engine running. And this thing's just huge. You'll be able to launch some absolutely massive payloads with this, as I already proved in my mission to Eve when I was assembling a ship. I actually used one of these engines to bring up the initial launch vehicles and stuff like that, bring up the actual ship And though the joints are a little bit wobbly, that's one bug I have found with the SpaceY mod. Between the fuel tanks, the engines, and all the different parts, the joints seem to be a little bit weak at the moment, meaning that if you don't have them strutted together, they could end up being perhaps a little bit wobbly. And that was definitely a problem I had with my launch vehicles. Just go back and watch the first episode of my mission to Eve to actually see that in action, because it was quite hilarious, but not when I was flying it. But that's pretty much it for the liquid fuel engines in this, but SpaceY also adds in a number of solid rocket boosters. You can see here, first of all, we have a bigger Separatron. It's called the Ejectatron, has a max thrust of 137 with 180 in a vacuum, only has 60 units of solid fuel. The description says, larger rockets require larger ejection systems, a significantly larger variant of the competing product. Warning, not edible. Which is always a good warning to have. You can see again, if I attach it to the probe core here, you can see just how large this thing is. What's it say on the side here? Warning, contains propellant, do not eat. Thank you, SpaceY. Thank you for clearing that up to us. I actually made a small 0.625 rocket, and I used these as solid rocket boosters earlier, and these things are insane when you've got such a light rocket. It propelled it up to at least 4,000 meters with no sweat. It got up to around 700 meters a second, because I obviously had them in like 8 times symmetry like that. It propelled it up to 4,000 meters, absolutely no sweat, and it was going around 700 meters a second by that point, which was hilarious, but also kind of scary at the same time. Moving on, we have the SpaceY S109 heavy lift solid rocket booster. Has a max thrust of 1,189.474 at sea level. Thrust in a vacuum of 2,000. Has quite a lot of solid fuel with 3,375 units. The description says, when Kerbal boosters just aren't enough, go with a wider design. This SRB is designed to burn faster than most other models, allowing for short, heavy lifting when necessary. Use the thrust limiter if you need to need longer burn times instead. Defaults, and it goes into a load of default times, which I'll let you read for yourself. Now, these are very cheap. They're only 2,430 funds, and I'll just click it on, and you can see already this is rather huge. But it is a 1.25 meter to 2.5 meter solid rocket booster, and it basically does everything it says on the tin. It's an easy lifter. Not much else to say about it other than that, and the same with the rest of the boosters here. Not really much else to say about it other than the modelling, once again, is very good. You can see here we've got the flag, which you can obviously toggle as well. I like the fact that the flags have been included on these. I think it looks very, very cool. And like I say, you could put this as a first stage of a rocket if you wanted to. You could put a solid rocket booster, similar to how the Ares rockets work, with the single solid rocket booster at the base. You could always do that with one of these solid rocket boosters, and I think that would be very cool. Moving on to the next one, we have the S115 heavy lift solid rocket booster, which basically has the exact same description, has a max thrust at sea level of 2,236 and a max thrust in a vacuum of 2,500. Again, this is a 1.25 to 2.5 meter variant, but it's just basically an extended version of this. I mean, look at this. It's basically exactly the same thing with more booster added, which isn't a bad thing. I think that more booster is always a good thing, especially in Kerbal Space Program. You can see we've got the flag on it again. I think it looks very, very cool. Moving on to the next one, this is the S211 Super Heavy Lift Solid Rocket Booster. Has a max thrust at sea level of 2,505.263, max thrust in the vacuum of 2,800, and it has exactly the same description again. But this one is, I think, 2.5 meter solid, maybe even 3.75 meter. Let's get a fuel tank for comparison here. Yeah, it's 2.5 meter solid rocket booster, and this thing is a very chunky monkey. It's almost like 2 of these nozzles, and for these boosters here, well, 4 of these nozzles all joined together at the base here. And like I say, it is a very chunky monkey booster, which is, I think it looks very cool. I love the little flaring around the base here, and I like the sort of fact it's got a spring as well, as if it's trying to absorb the impact of the massive thrust that this thing gives out. But I don't know, maybe that was just me. So I'll pop that away. And then we have two more here. The first one is the S217 Super Heavy Lift Solid Rocket Booster. Has a max thrust at sea level of 3,400 and a max thrust in a vacuum of 3,800. And again, it has the same description. I'm going to take it off here, and it is basically an extended version of this booster. You can see if I pop this next to one another, they're basically exactly the same, except this one is longer. And I don't know, I think this one looks a little bit better than this one just because it's taller and it looks a bit less chunky. I don't like chunky looking boosters because they're sort of odd looking. I don't know, maybe it's just me. You guys obviously will pick your own if you decide to download this mod, which I highly recommend that you do. The final booster, final booster that we have here is another 2.5 meter booster. It is the SpaceY 223 Super Heavy Lift Solid Rocket Booster. Has a thrust of 4,473 in at sea level and 5,000 in a vacuum. This is the largest solid rocket booster that you can get with SpaceY, and if we try desperately to put it on here, this is an even larger version of this one. And again, I think these boosters are going up in a logarithmic... in fact, no, they're not going up logarithmically. What am I saying? This is the smallest version, this is the middling version, this is the largest version. They're basically the same booster, only varying in sizes. So that's the end of the engines. Thank God. There were so many stats there, and I've probably fumbled a lot of them that I've probably fried your brain. If you're still watching this, then well done you, frankly, for listening to me ramble on about stats of engines for like 20 minutes. But if I told you there was more, what would you say? Oh God would probably be your first port of call. But oh yes, there is so much more. We have in the control section, we have some new RCS thrusters. These are just from KW Rocketry, so ignore these guys. However, these aren't. These have the new... these RCS thrusters are unlike anything you've ever seen, and they are very cool indeed. This is the Dibamus RCS OMS thruster block. Has a mass of 0.2, max thrust at sea level of 31.2, and a max thrust in a vacuum of 65. But why would we need to know this for an RCS thruster, I hear you ask? Well, as you can see by the model, and if I zoom in here and give you a better view of it on here, you can see that while it also has directional control in the translatory positions, it also has actual RCS engines here. So it works similar to the vernier engines, except these things are a lot more powerful and a lot less efficient as well. The actual RCS translation thrusters are about 5 times more powerful than these usual little thruster blocks here as well, which means docking at higher speeds is going to be one hell of a lot easier. Now, I think that these things actually look very, very cool indeed. As you can see, it's got 2 little nozzles here for actual RCS like thrusting, and then we've got translational thrusters here. We also have another version of this which is even larger, and you can see the size comparison when compared to this smaller one here. It is the Super Dibamus RCS OMS thruster block. Has a mass of 0.6, so these things are they're rather heavy RCS thrusters, shall we say. Has a max thrust of 78 at sea level, and max thrust of 162 in a vacuum. The actual translational thrusters have a power of 10 as well, so they're 10 times more powerful than these little thruster blocks, and twice as powerful as these little guys. It says in the description, a true orbital maneuvering system. This unit combines 5-axis reaction control thrusters with a throttle controlled monopropellant engine. Also quite effective as a landing engine. So let's say you were landing on Juno, and you were hurtling down under your parachute, but you still hadn't slowed down quite enough. You can just give these engines a little burst to kill off the remainder of your speed, and very, very soon you'll be on the surface, no worries. I think they're very cool, both of these engines. I think this one looks cooler, although I can't see it being very efficient, ever. I can see this thing would be actually a lot more useful if it was able to sort of swivel. You can see here it's like if you combine this with Infernal Robotics and you put it on a rotation, So you could maybe rotate this thing around. It would be sort of like the thrusters on the ships in Star Citizen. I think that would be a very cool thing to add with this thruster. Still very cool though, and it still has a lot of uses. We also have the SpaceY 5x7 thruster block. Now this is a very simple thruster block. It's basically a more powerful version of this minus the actual engine. It says here a simple 5-axis rotation control thruster block equivalent to 7 RV105 RCS thruster blocks. So 7 of these basically. It's basically one of these, only it has an extra direction to translate from, because obviously it has a little thruster nozzle here, which this one doesn't have, and it's 7 times as powerful and a little bit heavier. Which is fine. I definitely like these engines a lot more, although they do eat up your RCS something crazy. That's just one thing to watch out with these, is that they eat up your RCS fuel really quickly. Like, really quickly, so definitely need to watch out for those. And finally, in the control section, we have the SAS modules that are bought with this mod. We have the 3.75 meter external reaction wheel. Not much else to say about this other than the fact that you need to, if I grab this and I grab a tank here, if I find the 3.75 meter tank, and I shall show you, if I attach it, there we go. Basically, these come in halves and they are radial, so if you have to attach them like this, and then put symmetry on, and they actually interlock, if I can get it right, round about like that. That isn't quite perfect, but they weigh half a ton each, so obviously the reaction wheel weighs about a ton in total because you need 2 of them. Very, very nice, and you can also get a 5 meter variant, which is basically exactly the same, only it is 0.6, the mass is 0.6½ rather than 0.5½. You can imagine that going round a 5 meter stage there. Obviously it doesn't quite fit properly because this is 3.75 meter and the radius is all messed up. But I like these very much because you can place them anywhere on a ship, albeit on the booster, on the base of a booster and stuff, and it just provides a lot more control of your vessel, because let's face it, with larger vessels you need as much control as possible. Next up in the structural section, we don't have all that much, but we do have a couple of cool fairing things. Now basically what you can do here is they have different base radiuses, so this one is 3.75 meter. But depending on which node you attach it to, depends on the actual width of the end adapter. So you can see here we've just got the cross plate at the base, which has a 3.75 meter radius. You can see here if we attach it at the top, it goes down to 1.25 meter radius. However, if we attach it on the second to the middle node, shall I say, it goes down to 2.5 meter. I think this is very cool. Just a nice little addition, makes your rockets look a lot neater. The same goes for these guys. This goes from down from 5 meters, so obviously this has a 5 meter base radius, to around 1 to 3.75, 2.5 meter, or 1.25. So again, does exactly the same thing depending on which node you attach it by. Again, very cool, makes your rockets look a lot neater. You can also see here we have different interstage adapters for different engines. These basically, if I read the description here, it says the size of the thing, it says customize your engine clusters in either an upper stage with fairing or lower stage configuration. This model is suitable for the LV909, Rapier, Toroidal, Aerospike and jet engines. Obviously there's different sorts depending on what actual things, rockets you want to add. Basically, these mean that you can not only add more than one engine, so you can see the larger ones here. It means you can not only add more than one engine to the base of your craft, but you can also add a little interstage fairing on the base there, I believe. So you can see here we can have like loads of 1.25 meter engines on the base here, and then have a massive 2.5 meter in the center, and they're all joined to a 5 meter fuel tank. There are varying different sizes of these. You can see here we've got all different kinds. If I flip over onto the next page, you can see all the other stuff that I have to cover. This is one truly large mod, and if you've made it this far so far, then I can only congratulate you, because there's a lot more stuff to come. So we can see here we also have some different launch clamps. They are a ton each, and these are heavy-duty launch clamps, because heavy-duty rockets are not complete without heavy-duty launch clamps. It says, designed for an extra-large spacecraft, these heavy-duty launch clamps should help to prevent spontaneous disassembly of the launch pad and the launch vehicle, supposedly. Now, this does actually output electric charge, presumably because it looks like it's covered in solar panels, but we'll see if we can actually attach it here. You can see just how bloody large these things are. They're just huge. There's not much else you can say about them here, really. Again, very nice texturing job, and I love the fact that the flag's actually on there again. Flag seems to be on a lot of these, doesn't it? But yeah, these things are absolutely huge. Going on to some more different things though, we have some aerodynamic radial decouplers. So if you want an alternative to, say, these guys, the TT338K radial decouplers, you want something a bit more aerodynamic, a bit nicer, you can get these guys. As rocket parts continue to grow in size due to technological advancements, so must the decoupler systems. This large radial decoupler is designed to work with the largest SRBs available and features an active thrusting component to ensure clean separation. If not desired, the thrusters can be disabled while editing by removing the fuel. So these things basically have built-in separatrons to them. So when you come to ditch your stage, ditch your external boosters, they have little inbuilt motors so that you can get a clean separation, and you basically don't have your solid rocket boosters smashing into the side of your rocket, which happens to me so many times. And it also has a mass of 0.5 though, which is it's kind of a lot if you ask me. And like I say again, very large, have a very nice texture on them. You can see here the little direction of the actual the thrust itself. And on top of the actual thrust, it also has an ejection force like any other decoupler. We also have the larger triple packed radial decoupler, which is basically the same, only it has more thrust with regards to the separation and stuff. These are for even bigger boosters, basically. Same size as this, only like I say, they are more powerful. Basically the same texture as well, other than these three little arrows here. Again, I think that these are very useful, especially with the larger solid fuel boosters, which I spent forever talking about in the last section of the video. Very cool, very neat indeed. You can see here as well, we also have some actual stack decouplers, obviously for 5 meter and stuff. Just look how big these things are. 3.75 meter stack separators. They're basically just stack separators and just normal decouplers for each of these guys. Now you can see, just look how large these things are. They're just huge. I have no words. They're huge compared to absolutely everything that I've seen on this game so far. Very awesome. But that is it for structural. I believe that nothing new has been added in aero, as far as I'm aware, apart from the 5 meter fairing, which works basically exactly the same as a normal fairing that would work in normal stock Kerbal Space Program, only, like I say, got a little bit of a different texture, and aside from that, just works exactly the same. You can put your own nice little fairing, and when you hover over it, it expands, it gives you an exploded view. Very nice, very cool, very simple, and very awesome. In the utilities, I believe there is nothing new apart from these, and I believe these are the last things I'll be going on about. There are 3 things in utilities. First of all, remember what I was saying about the SpaceX landing earlier? Well, a SpaceX landing also has some landing legs at the base of the rocket. That's what these things are. You can place them on the base here. You can expand them just like any other normal landing gear, and it looks very similar to the actual SpaceX landing gear itself. But what if you want to put these things on a smaller rocket? Because these are obviously for 5 meter. You can tell the thing's absolutely huge. What if you want to put these legs on a smaller rocket, so like a 2.5 meter rocket? Well, do not fear, because SpaceY gives you the individual legs, which you can attach in radial fashion to your craft. It's working exactly the same way. You just have to assign them to action groups, and as you can see there, they just they retract and they go. They land and perform as landing gear perfectly fine, which is very cool and awesome. The final thing that we have here is the 3.75 to 2.5 meter conical payload bay. Now, if you've ever seen a Saturn V rocket and you've seen Apollo 13 and the like, different films about going to the moon, you'll have seen the Saturn V rocket and you'll have seen that the lander, the actual lunar landing module, the LEM, I think it's, yeah, Lunar Excursion Module, is kept within this little fairing with the command module sitting on top. What happens is once the transfer stage of the Saturn V had burned to the moon and got them on an orbital encounter with the moon, this fairing would then open up and the command module would separate, would then turn around, dock with the lander, with the docking port that would be inside the lander, and would pull the lander free of this fairing and would continue to the moon on a separate trajectory. So if we take this out here, this allows you to do exactly the same. Unfortunately, it's not as procedural as the other fairings are, which means you will have to design your landers to fit within this little space here. But you can close the doors, and you'll be able to see the space that you've got inside there to actually place your lunar lander, or Mooner lander should I say, with your command module on top. Looks very cool, and I do think that this is a better option than the KW rocketry variant of this, just purely because you can actually right click and open and close them, and yeah, you can assign distraction groups, but it doesn't actually affect anything as far as I'm aware. All very cool, all very nice. So that's pretty much it for this mod. That's all the parts for all of them. Sorry if I've been talking a lot, by the way, because there was a lot of stats in this video. A lot of stats for particularly all the different engines and stuff. Like I say, I am very sorry if I've bored you to death. But if you've made it to the end of this video, then you guys are awesome. Like I say, there isn't really that much KSP news this week, other than the fact that KSP is coming to PS4. I'm very, very excited for that. I may do a separate video with regards to my opinions on that. And like I say, there's no KSP news other than that, and I'd already done an episode in midweek on that. That's why there's no KSP news this week. But guys, thanks very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please do remember to leave a like. If you got to the end of this video and you didn't fall asleep, then please say, I don't know, please type in the comments down below Saturn V if you did actually get to the end of this video, because I know it was quite a long video and I am very sorry for that. There's just so many parts to cover, so many intricate details that I wanted to go over with you guys. But yeah guys, remember to like and subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next video. This is Brad signing off. Peace!